Ooh, I'm back. You probably don't want me putting that on the sound gear. Cool. That's the verse for today. Matthew 22, verses 37 to 40. So we'll jump down into there at some point, but we're going to take a minute just to get there. Oh my goodness. Okay. So a healthy heart belongs to God. Is your heart healthy? I don't know about you, but when I hear the phrase healthy heart, I think about my physical heart, these things. So if you indulge me, again, I've got to get better with technology. Okay, have you ever taken your pulse? We're going to try that now. I think you find it. Oh man, don't do it with your thumb. I know you don't do that because your thumb has a pulse in it. That should get you up here, Nikki, to take pulses. We've got a paramedic in the room, so if you have no pulse, run to that side of the room. So you're going to find it in here, find it in there. If you can't find it, maybe your neighbor will let you do it for them. I don't know. But you're going to count your beats for 15 seconds, and then that's when you have to then do maths and times it by 4. I know there's some really good mathematicians in this section of the room, so if you're struggling, you can go ask them. But we'll give it a go. So if you've got a pulse, even if you don't, the timer is going now. Oop. So if you have a pulse, the number times it by 4, maybe share with your neighbor what your resting heart rate is. Rachel, what should they be concerned with? Over 100. I'm currently 135. Okay. Okay. Has anyone got 0? Because that's a concern. Okay. So medical attention in this corner. Last rites somewhere else. My heart rate's about 140 at the moment, but that's, I guess, because I'm up here speaking, and those stairs are big and long, and took a long effort. Okay, so we hear the word a heart for every person. What do we mean? It's not just a physical heart. It's not just good health. We instinctively know it's much more than that. And so, certainly in the Bible, the word heart encompassed a lot of things. And so I'm just going to play a video from the Bible Project of them explaining the word heart.
For thousands of years, every morning and evening, Jewish people have prayed these well-known words as a way of expressing their devotion to God. They're called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And as for you, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. We're going to look at the fourth key word in this prayer, heart, which in Hebrew is sometimes pronounced levav, or more often in a shorter form, lev. Now, different cultures throughout history have had different conceptions of how the human body works, and this is also true of the ancient Israelite writers of the Bible. They knew that the heart was an organ in the chest that sustains life. There's mention of a heart attack in the Bible, Naval, whose heart died inside of him and he became like stone. But the biblical authors talk about the heart in many other ways that might seem strange to modern readers, and that's because these Israelites had no concept of the brain or any word for it. They imagined that all of a human's intellectual activity takes place in the heart. For example, you know with your heart in the Bible. Your heart is where you understand and make connections. In the book of Proverbs, wisdom dwells in the heart. And your heart is what you use to discern between truth and error, like Solomon did when he was king. So the heart is where you think and make sense of the world, and it's where you do more. In the Bible, the heart is where you feel emotions. You feel pain in your heart, like Hannah did when she couldn't have any children. In fact, the phrase "a broken heart" comes from ancient biblical Hebrew. You also experience fear in your heart. Your heart can melt or be distressed. Your heart can even be depressed. But then on the flip side, your heart is where you experience joy. In Hebrew, to be happy is to be good of heart, or to have a heart of joy. So the heart is the generator of physical life. It's also the center of your intellectual and emotional life, and there's more. In biblical Hebrew, the heart is where you make choices motivated by your desires. So David had it in his heart to build a temple for God. Your heart is where your affections are centered. They're called the desires of your heart. And if you really want something and go after it, it's like what Nathan said to David, whatever's in your heart, go and do it. So then, in the Bible, the heart is the center of all parts of human existence, as in the well-known proverb, guard your heart, because from it flows your whole life. Now, the prophet Jeremiah believed that the human heart was fundamentally broken. He said, the heart of a human is deceitful above all, irreversibly sick. Who can even understand it? He had watched a whole generation turn away from God. They started sacrificing their children as if that were a good thing. So this is why, in the imagination of the Hebrew prophets, the only hope for humanity is the total renewal of the human heart. Moses predicted that if Israel was ever going to love their God, their heart would need to be circumcised, which is a very vivid and surprising metaphor about removing evil and stubbornness from the human heart. David, after he committed murder and adultery, pleads with God to create in me a pure heart. The prophet Ezekiel hoped for a day when God would remove the heart of stone and give his people a new heart of soft flesh, which is very similar to Jeremiah's hope that God would write the commands of the Torah on the hearts of his people. And that brings us all the way back to the Shema. Every day, God's people are called to devote to God their whole body and mind, their feelings and their desires, their future and their failures. This is what it means to love the Lord your God with all of your heart.
That's what the Bible writers mean when they say heart, not just a little diagram, not your physical heart, but the heart is encompassing in all of these things. And I think often when we hear the word heart, we narrow it down, or we see just such a small part of it. So there's the physical heart. We all took our heart piece. Heartbeat, heart rate. I'm very grateful and thankful for your prayers. My heart is no longer anemic as of a blood test 2-3 days ago. Just by the squeakiest of margins, I am in a good, healthy range. So thank you for your prayers. And yeah, we feel our heart. We look after our heart. Often, that I would say in our culture, that's a big focus. I walked along the beach and saw many people running. I know there are a ton of gym buffs, and don't look away, Leilani, in that part of the room, and I'm sure elsewhere, people that want to be healthy, physically strong. We get that part in our culture. We know that. The emotional center, yeah, we follow your heart. It's all feelings, it's all feel good, and I think these two we are quite comfortable with. We want to be around people who make us feel good. A heart for every person. Yes, I want to be and connect and make sure that you're happy and that you're doing okay and stuff like that. But conversely, if it's just about how we're all feeling, then when the going gets tough or people get difficult, we remove ourselves. We cancel them, or we limit what's going on. There's got to be more to what we're wanting for each other. And so then they talk about in the video, it's the center of our thought. Our heart and our choices and our desires are all linked. It's our understanding, our knowledge. And yes, we need to give all of these things to God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Desire him. Think of him. Turn your attention towards him always. But I felt really challenged when in our values, it's a heart for every person. What kind of heart am I going to give the people around me in my world? In the video, you might have picked up one of the verses there that Jeremiah the sinfulness and the brokenness of the human heart. I am very aware of my fallible human heart. At 4:30 this morning, I was woken up by someone that I love dearly. At 4:30, it was harder to love him than at other times, and I was very grateful that I could turn to Emily and say, I'm preaching this morning, your problem. I need to sleep. So Emily's been up since 4:30, and on their way to church, she fell asleep. But I was very grateful. I got to serve my needs. I got to look after myself, get my sleep. There are times when we are faced with young people at youth group coming through the door, and I just don't want to be anywhere but here. I would rather be at home watching TV. I don't know. Sorry. My heart is not a perfect heart. That's not the heart that I want to give to the people around me. I want to give this kind of heart. I want to give a heart that is grounded and centered on God's heart. So, I want to give this. Oh, too far. I'm going to turn to my Bible to read that because it comes up a bit small for me. Okay. So, oops, that's the wrong. I'm in Mark, not Matthew. My apologies. Okay. So, Mark 22. My Bible here in the NLT has it as the most important commandment. I'm starting at verse 34. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, this is Jesus, with his reply, they met together to question him again. One of them, an expert in religious law, tried to trap him, Jesus, with this question. Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? Jesus replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. What's the greatest commandment? To love the Lord your God with all your heart. And then Jesus, for good measure, adds in that the second one is to love your neighbor, to love others the way that we love ourselves. If I go back to that, if I apply that to God, I'm a work in progress. I'm trying to give him that kind of heart as much as I can, as often as I can. For myself, I'm really good at doing those things for myself. Following what I feel is right, following what I think is right, following my choices and my desires. I was sick on Friday, and the internet's a dangerous place. There were lots of things that I was wanting to buy and desire, and Jesus, if we come back to here, is to love others as we love ourselves. To give that kind of heart to God and to others. He puts the two together. He folds them in together. There's no separating them. And I think he does it because a healthy heart is a heart that belongs to God. If you're pursuing God, if you have a heart for him, if you're seeking after him, from that then flows better understanding of ourselves, and we are better capable then to be loving and mindful and caring towards others. I've experienced that for the last 20 years being a part of the church. I've been surrounded by people, different times, different ages and stages, who have come alongside me, and there are a lot of people that mean well, that do good things, and they've been instrumental, but there's something different about the people that are doing that from the wellspring of God's heart. You know, when you come across men, women, young, old, who are just centered on God and his love, they go the length There's the depth, there's a duration, and it is just wonderful. These things are linked. For us to have a heart for every person, we need to have a heart for God. Jesus makes the two link together constantly. Love one another. By this, people will know that you are my disciples. Serve me, feed me, clothe me, Jesus says. And then they go, how? Whatever you did for the least of these, whatever you did for others, you were doing it for me. But that only really makes sense if we're grounded and centered in desiring God first. A healthy heart belongs to God. If we have a healthy heart, we will be more capable of having a heart for every person. On Tuesday night, we were looking at John 15 with the high school Bible study, and we read. Again, I've got to read my own writing. So starting in John 9, this is what we read. This is what I read with the year 9s and 10s up in room A. I have loved you even as, this is Jesus speaking again, I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends. Since I have told you everything the Father told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. This is my command, love each other. It has to be centered in a love for God, a love for Jesus. Without it, we won't go the distance. Without it, it will be a poor substitute to the real thing. Love each other. The question of the night, and Nadia, I should have probably asked you before I shared, but it's safe, I promise. It's all good stuff. So the question of the night was, if God wants to love us in this way and be our friend, what would we do to be connecting with God? And so we're sitting around the table, and then we paired up. Nadia and I were chatting, and we're talking about, you want to spend time with your friends. You want to listen to your friends. You want to be present and involved in the things that your friends are doing through the good and the bad. That's what a good friend does. And then we turn our attention and go, do we want that with God? Do we want to spend our time, what Bruce was talking about, in fellowship together at lunchtime? Are we spending that kind of time with our heart? A lot of us going to the gym 2, 3, 4 times a week, not me, that was us out there, us. Spending that time and effort to make our heart physically healthy. Are we spending the time with God to make our heart healthy in other ways? Are we taking that time with him? If you go back to Deuteronomy and you read that prayer that Israel was praying every day and night, it goes, the Shema, listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home, when you are on the road, when you are going to bed, and when you are getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them down on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Spend time with God. Give your heart to God. Do we do that? Nadia and I said sometimes we do that. We want to do that more. We want to be better at spending time with God and giving our heart to God. And from that, hopefully our heart for the people in this room, the people out there, the people at home will grow, will be nurtured, and will just be that overflow of God in my life. I'm picking on Nadia because Nadia has been someone, I'm trying not to have watery eyes, who's been caring for me for the last month in the smallest of ways, since church camp, connecting. Her little brother's about the same age as my son, so it's lots of times when we were crossing paths at camp and just talking and chatting and hanging out. And now she's joined youth group and she's there every Tuesday night with a big smile on her face and an even bigger Bible as she walks into the room. But without fail, whenever I see Nadia, she asks me how I'm doing. And she's not someone who asks in her busyness and then races off to the next thing. She lingers. And there's a smile and her eyes are welcoming and she invites me in and she says, how are you doing? And she's, lots of people do this. And again, Nadia, don't shrink in your sheet. This is a good thing. It makes me just feel cared for, connected in, looked after. And she's doing that every Sunday for me, every Tuesday for me, in the smallest of ways. So I know, Nadia, when we were talking, you're like, I need to be better at connecting with God and spending time with God. But I think you're there with your Bible, you're there wanting to do that stuff. You're well on your way, and it's overflowing into the way you're caring for people around you. And I imagine there's other people in the youth group that have benefited from that as well. Oh, I'll catch my place. I hadn't planned to go that far. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry, as they say. So yeah, a heart for every person. That's our value, that's our vision. The two are connected, a heart for God, a heart for people. They are inseparable for followers of Christ. You can't do one without the other. So if the idea of having a heart for every person feels too small, feels insignificant or narrow, or what difference could I make, or I'm busy and I'm distracted, maybe it's you're caught with just, it's all about feelings, or maybe you're a bit of a bruiser and you go, I've got to just make people think right, and your desire is to be right and have people know the truth, but you don't desire for them to come into a connecting, loving relationship with God and His people. Maybe you need to turn your heart towards God. I think Jesus links them for a reason. Over and over again, links them for a reason. If the idea of having a heart for every person feels too big, like just trying to have a heart for all of you, and there's just one of me, and we're all munted. There's a lot of stuff to figure out. And where do I turn? What do I do? Turn my heart towards God. The young adults have been covering prayer, another value of ours, on a Monday night, and we had an hour-long prayer session trying different prayers, and we were looking at intercessory prayer. And we were given 4 steps for intercessory prayer. Get informed. So what's going on in the world that is wrong and unjust? But then the second one was, what does God think about it? And we had to turn our hearts towards God. Then pray, intervene, turn our own hearts towards the people and what's going on in our world, and listen. And so this big idea we talked about, lockdown at Tawa College and the ram raids and the hopelessness of young people around Aotearoa, and it felt like a big problem, but we turned it to God. We turned our hearts towards God. We remembered His heart is bigger than ours for the people around us, and we prayed. Do we have amazing answers? No, but we learnt to turn towards God. If the idea of having a heart for every person feels too big, turn towards God. Emily's old youth pastor from Diamond Harbour days and his wife are now missionaries in Africa, and they were visiting our house. And I met Paddy for the first time. He's a real out there character. And he bowls on up to me and he says, knowing that I'm a youth pastor, says, I think it was like the second thing. I don't even know if he said hello. What are you doing to change the world? I was like, oh my goodness. And I paused, it was in my kitchen, I paused and I just said, I'm not trying to change the world. Every week I get an opportunity to spend time with young people, other people at church, other people in my family, around the place, and every time I'm around someone, I'm trying to impact and change their world for the better. I have a heart for every person. You know, exciting to have Nikki come through the door, smiles, and the youth person from blast from the past. Heart for every person, every conversation. We spend like half of our Bible studies hearing how people are going, how they're doing, and asking follow-up questions. And I'm loving that I'm not the only one asking follow-up questions anymore, because that's how we learn about each other. That's how we care about each other. That's how I know what's going on in people's world. I get the privilege of taking Pacey home because we live close by, and he's like, thank you so much for helping Mum and Dad. And I was like, well, it's an easy win to help them, but it's 20 minutes of learning about Pacey and getting to know Pacey and talking about what's going on in his world and things of faith and where our hearts are and stuff like that. That's precious time. How does it happen? We turn our hearts towards God and He will give us a heart for every person. A healthy heart belongs to God. Is your heart healthy? Let me pray. Lord, help us to love You with all our hearts, all our minds, our soul and our strength. Fill us with Your joy and help us that joy to overflow into our earthly relationships, our relationships with others. And give us a heart that desires to connect, to care, and to bring Your love to those around us. Amen.
Thanks, Brad. Is your heart healthy? How's your heart doing this morning? Sometimes, as Brad said, if it seems too overwhelming to have a heart for every person,